unanimously. Thank you.
Can we do the first one without Rich?
Can we do this without Rich?
Yeah.
Okay. Next up for our public hearing is Resolution 21-47, budget adjustment with multiple appropriations.
Including $14 million.
Including $14 million for the library, correct? Do we have any questions? We covered it very thoroughly 2 weeks ago. And the information for this is in the packet if anyone has not been able to see that so far. Any questions, comments about budget adjustment? I am open for a motion.
No, we have a
No,
public
you gotta-
hearing.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, sorry, that's my fault. No. So if there's no more comments, we will open it up for public comment. Now's your opportunity for budget adjustment, resolution 21-47. Not seeing anyone come up, let's bring it back to the council for action.
We did it without you.
I move that Rich be removed.
I would move approval of resolution 21-47.
Been moved and seconded for approval of resolution 21-47. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
You wait.
Resolution passes. I know, my cupcake was excellent. Thank you for the break and for the treats.
Next, make a rad comment. Again, $14 million, no public comment.
No public comment, yes.
Maybe they're all just so excited that we're
So
going to
excited.
the library. It's great, yeah, but.
If you would have had a bond election. you
Yeah.
would have been-
Best part of the library appropriation, we don't have to raise taxes. Is that correct, Rich?
That is correct.
Best part.
Thank you.
At this point, as long as we stay within budget.
Yeah. And yes, thank you.
Of course, you have to have a caveat.
Yes, and we will be staying within budget.
The committee has worked very hard and trimmed stuff from the plan to make it work. So, very excited about it. Okay, moving on. Public hearing for resolution 21-46. Would you like to guide us through this one?
Yes, this is a request to appropriate the American Rescue Plan dollars we received from the federal government. First, to appropriate $9,000 for administrative support through the League of Cities and Towns, and this is in a specific order. Next is to complete the construction of the fire station, which is estimated to be $7 million. And lastly, to contribute the remaining amount toward the Bluff storage tank. These are large, significant, long-term projects with long-term benefit. Therefore, we believe when our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and future posterity, even though they're living on another planet, they'll be able to pay this off because it will be paid at some point in the future.
Well, I benefit the community.
What's
I
that?
will benefit our community. But I did have an email from an individual who felt that we should use this money to create low-income housing. Could you talk about that?
I'm not sure. I'd have to find out in what way it might qualify. But the problem is that would support a specific segment of the population, for sure,
And it's its guidelines are
for the use of those funds. I have to look. The guidance is 100 pages long.
right.
And I believe, I don't know that low-income housing exactly qualifies, but housing in some respect would. So I imagine low-income does, but it's within some other category.
The other issue to be somewhat concerned about is the timing, because these funds need to be appropriated and used by a certain time. And we are somewhat concerned that given all the capital money that's coming from ARP, from the infrastructure bill, that is going to create a real demand on construction. And it will be interesting to see if there are enough contractors to go around to construct projects. So we would like to get ours moving as quickly as possible so we can utilize those funds and get that all tidied up and turned into the feds. So we meet all those requirements on deadline.
And these projects touch pretty much the entire community.
Everybody drinks water.
Everybody drinks
And
water.
everybody needs public safety, whether they utilize it or not. Again, that's one of the big things.
Well, everybody drinks water, but this is a state mandated
Correct.
tank. So we have to build it. And this is an opportunity for us not to have to increase water rates or something else to pay for it. So. I think
There's also a possibility, because we have several capital projects that are stacking up in the near future, and we've anticipated we'll have to bond for the next capital project after the storage tank. There is a possibility because of this infusion, we may be able to bond for less, we may be able to avoid bonding, which is, we don't save the capital cost, but we'd certainly save the financing cost, which is not insignificant. So this could really be a boon for us. Again, the priority is first to build the station, which we do need to resolve the location and move forward with that. And that is separate from this appropriation. And then to do the water tank. Right now, we're spending money on the water tank. And so that's why I am requesting to get this in place. There are still some steps on the fire station, but as the mayor said, we're hoping we can resolve those relatively quickly and get things rolling, because I do worry with all of the funds, all of the projects that are happening, we may not have contractors to fulfill all those projects within the statutory guideline timeline. Now, our fail-safe is we will just allocate all of it toward the water project, but then we don't have a station. So it's a good financial alternative, but it doesn't help us build a station, and that's a bad thing.
I'd like to comment with regard to what this individual has, that we ought to build housing. I would hope that the city would not build housing. We could use money to incentivize a contractor. But I've seen cities where they built and operated housing and it turned out to be a disaster. You have a private entity do it, and that would be the way. Perhaps that's what he is intended. I just thought I'd put that in the record.
Does the tie-in still ultimately have to be back to COVID-19
It does.
impact? So, I mean, I guess one could identify that low-income people were, that housing was impacted in order for us, if they would think to justify the uses of these funds, which may or may not be an easy thing to do underneath underneath this act, so.
I haven't looked at that issue specifically. I do think there is some possibility. However, having said that, I still feel like these are the best projects. They're shovel ready. Low-income housing would be, I don't know that you could actually do it within the statutory guideline. It just, not keep it open to the public, get good input, put it in the right places, make sure we're not wasting funds. Make sure we're not just lining some contractor's pockets.
I
It just couldn't
wanted
be
to make
done.
sure that I asked the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Rich? This is a public hearing. Now's your opportunity to let us know what you think about Resolution 21-46.
Right, can you go up to the,
Please, name, where you live.
perfect. So my name is Bryson Wilkes. I live at 1022 North, First East. So the area that I wanted to address here in this public hearing is about the fire station that's being built and the $7 million being appropriated for those funds. We sat through, we saw the presentation. I hope you consider the email that was sent and shared with all of you about some of those discrepancies between that and the biasness that I believe was truly given in that. So yes, there was consulting, but it was consulting based off of a predetermined solution, not a blinded true evaluation of what that is. So I bring that to council as, looking at this truly from an unbiased perspective of what makes sense for the city and best use of its funds. So, thanks.
Thank you, Bryce.
I'm Rebecca Sharp. I live at 229 North 100 East. That's one of the properties being proposed for demolition for the fire station. You mentioned, am I allowed to comment on this right now? It does have to do with allocation of funds.
It's the appropriation, yes.
Okay, so according to the key that Chief Hannick provided, on our property, which is 4 parcels of land, 3 homes, and a 5th partial parcel, they have it as listed as under $2 million, under $1 million, I believe. That was a 1 he had it at, and according to his key, a 1 for cost is less than $1 million to acquire. Could you explain that to me? Because I know it's much greater than that to acquire. And I also pointed this out to get it corrected before it was presented, and no one responded. And that is a huge factor in making us the front runner in that numerical evaluation with all these properties.
Thank you. You have to receive some estimates for some appraisals.
She was taking into account that we would sell or trade the, the existing fire station, so that will offset the cost of whatever we do, so.
Sorry, one more comment. If a trade is being proposed, that's not at no cost and should also be factored into it. Also, I mean, that should be public knowledge. If a trade is being proposed to one of the properties that's greater than market value than what's being traded, that should also be factored into the cost.
And anytime the city does trade sales, we get appraisals, it's done publicly, so your point is well taken and we will proceed with that should we move forward.
Any other comments about this resolution, 21-46? Not seeing any, let's bring it back to the council for consideration.
So I'm going to assume that the comments that were just made relate to the fact that is the $7 million enough for the project? I mean, these questions about property acquisition costs. So unfortunately, I was unable to be here. I did listen to the past meeting, but the $7 million estimate, does that include that land acquisition estimates, or is that just the construction cost for
This is just construction, and I've tried to separate all of those issues so that the only thing with ARPA dollars we're dealing with is the construction of the station. Whether we sell a station, acquire property, whether somebody donates it in some other location entirely, those are all going to be separate issues. And so we've tried to unencumber the federal funds from anything that might happen with those issues.
Okay. Thank you.
So the anticipation is we'll have to appropriate funds from capital reserves to acquire the station.
There's land acquisition costs.
But the anticipation is that we would sell that station once the new station was complete. We do have estimates for what we would bring in from that sale, and that would be also used or deducted from the amount that we would expend from capital funds.
But the $7 million in here is a reasonable expectation for construction costs.
It's a
I
guesstimate.
understand.
Our hope is it's far, far less than that. $1.5 million, that'd be terrific. That's what I'm hoping for.
And then whatever's left over goes right to the water
Right,
fund.
so the water.
No tank.
Anything we can save, we'll allocate toward that project. Anything we need will be taken back. And we've come to council in order to do that, any of those adjustments. But this is just a finance director's dark.
I'll move acceptance of resolution 2146.
I have a question. What is the timeline on the water tank?
We are,
Here, and they're starting the design process right now, and that's the need for the appropriation. It just
Year and a
depends,
half.
yeah.
substantial completion of the project prior to December 31st of 2024 though, so.
Again, we just like to get it going as soon as possible.
Does the drought have any impact on how we're planning for the future for this tank, or?
I don't think this year
That
has
was
any.
required by the state before this year became an issue with drought. Certainly water storage, it's kind of based on our population. There's a formula as to how much storage we should have for the size of our city, and as we've grown, that number, that storage capacity requirement has increased. So it was really independent of the drought situation this year.
And is it expandable?
The water is
The tank,
It's going to be 12 million Is it 12 million or more than that? I thought it was 12 million.
You're asking non-engineers all these specific questions.
And that's an ongoing 12 million gallons, so it has to maintain that amount, if I remember correctly. So it's a lot of water.
So again, it's just storage, it's not creating new water. I mean, we still have DeWitt Springs and all of our Florida City wells, but it will create storage.
If I remember correctly from the discussion, which was probably 3 years ago or 4, it was mandated to be a certain percentage of daily or weekly use. And that's how large it had to be. So,
And it's designed for the pressure, having sufficient pressure, for example, for fire. And so you're not using extra water, you're just having the pressure available.
Yeah, no, yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
yeah.
We can have Paul give us an update next meeting if you'd like more details. Or we can send you an
We
email.
have a motion. Tom has moved that we approve. Is there a second?
I'll send that.
Resolution 21-46 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Resolution passes. Next, our public hearing for ordinance 21-15, Thornley Dental Rezone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to be here. Talk about the Thornley Rezone. This was, hold on, let me get to the slides. This was brought to us by Mark Thornley. It's at the corner of 2nd South and 1st East, 195 South, 1st East. It's 1.2 acres. The original application was for a rezone to TC1. The Planning Commission, through their process, amended that application and recommended TC2. The applicant was okay with that, and so that is the ordinance language tonight. On the ordinance, it says TC2, even though some of the previous agendas, the original public notice says TC1. So just so you understand that timeline. The Planning Commission recommended 6-1 in favor of the TC2 zone. There were numerous folks at the Planning Commission meeting. The main concerns were from the residential areas to the east, and how do you step down that intensity of TC1, and so that's why TC2 was suggested. It's much lower in height and density. The applicant has always indicated, both in writing and at the meeting, that his intention is to build a dental office, likely a single story, maybe a 2-story, and maybe some small medical suites to go along with that. But he has never stated that his intention is a large, high-rise apartment complex. Currently, it's he did indicate he may have one kind of caretaker type of unit, but not a multi-family complex.
And he is a dentist.
He is a dentist, correct. So currently, it's a church, a red brick church built in 1954, I believe. Parking lot on the east side. The block is quite mixed. You have the Wayside Gardens on the north. You have several commercial areas, Chuckarama, Joann's. There was a question last meeting about L59 and the expiration date. That is February 2022. That project entitlement will expire if we don't have building permits prior to that date. So 3-4 months away, 6 months away. And I am happy to answer any questions at this point.
Could I ask a question? If it's a dental suite, why do they need TC2? Why not something that's more modest?
Dental is allowed in both TC1 and TC2.
I know that.
I think The reason is the FLUP calls out the entire block as TC, and so the Planning Commission thought, well, TC2 is a step down in intensity, and it falls in line with the FLUP. There's commercial adjacent to the south, but commercial zoning also
That's
allows,
all flop. There's not commercial adjacent to the south right now in
It's-
the house.
well, it's kitty corner to the south, so there was talk about commercial there.
You could put housing in,
Yeah.
and commercially, the
Commercial, a
setbacks
lot
are,
more
the
dense.
setbacks are smaller than TC2 also, aren't they? The setbacks for commercial, aren't they less?
Well, since it's adjacent to NR6, the setbacks are gonna be 25 feet no matter what, because you match NR6 across the street. The one thing about the commercial zone is it opens up a lot of uses like, car repair and a wider range of uses that might not be as compatible with homes across the street, where the TC2 is a little more limited in those commercial uses.
So just because, can you review what the height requirements, density requirements and all that on TC2, just so we have it for people who are listening?
Thank you, and I just looked it up because I knew that question was coming. TC1 is 70 units per acre, and you can go up to 80 feet tall. TC2 is 30 units per acre, and you can go up to 45 feet tall. But because, again, it's across the street from NR6, you have a height transition, so you can only start at 35 feet, and then you can terrace up as you go farther away from the single-family zone.
But they have to terrace on two sides.
Yes. Because in this case, you have single family to the south and you have single family to the east.
So it's gonna be like, do a little tower.
Yes.
There was an email that came in about possibly suggesting mixed use instead. What's the,
Mixed use has a smaller setback, doesn't it?
No, it still has the same setback.
same
because
setback, but how many units per?
That's right.
Mixed use is 30. Mixed use has a bonus option, and mixed use is 50. Yeah, and mixed use is 55 feet tall, so it's a little bit taller and the possibility of being a little more dense.
Right, because we took the bonus out of TC2 when we passed that, correct? There is no density bonus in TC2.
If it's more dense than
Yeah, TC1 has a bonus, TC2 does not.
Right.
And TC2 requires commercial on the first floor.
TC2 does not require commercial. TC2 can be residential.
And it could also be multifamily residential too, like.
Yes.
You could put, a townhome, technically, in
Yes.
TC2 if you wanted to.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
That is interesting. Why
Lots
is
of possibilities. Community commercial was mentioned, but ultimately the planning commission went with TC2.
So, tell me how, never mind, it's a different discussion.
Because I do recall, we took the density bonus out of TC2 when we passed that back in 18.
I just didn't know we could have housing on the first floor, so.
And it could be the multifamily residential, if it meets the multifamily residential design standards, you could do multifamily there too.
Yeah, if you remember, the TC2 is kind of on the outskirts of downtown, and it's geared to be both residential or commercial. If you're on Main Street or 400 North, you have mandatory commercial, but otherwise you don't.
Any other questions from us?
And right now it's zoned NR6, is that correct?
Yes, this map on the screen shows the current zone, NR6. Most churches in town are zoned NR6 for whatever reason.
Because they were related to the houses in the community, the housing surrounding them.
Makes sense, makes sense. Russ, thank you for your churches. Thank you very much. Okay, let's open this up for public comment. Ordinance 21-15. I'd like to comment about the Thornley Dental Rezone. Now is your opportunity.
Gary Yost. I live just half block south of that. And I object to having any kind of town center in our residential area. because the FLUP has already decided that we're supposed to be a commercial all on my block, which is absolutely ridiculous, that the FLUP is just excluding any kind of input from the people who have lived there a long time. Some have lived there on that block longer than I have. And I have lived in that house for 42 years, and the front part of the house is 140 years old. I do not want any kind of creeping in of town center, because once that happens, it's so much easier to go to taking down houses, making it commercial all the way, which is ridiculous. We are a stable entity as far as the edge of Wilson neighborhood. We're stable. And we have some rentals there, but we also have mostly houses that are owner occupied. Why should we be put in that position of having any kind of town center? We fought so hard to get the L59 back from First East, to get the townhouses instead. We have agreed to the townhouses. We are not disputing in any way the need to have the church taken down because it had too much damage from last year's earthquake. And it was considered to be masonry and not done by having a frame. Therefore, it is unsafe. We understand that. We do not object to having a dental office or even some medical offices. I object personally that if we have a town center, even town center 2, with all the parking that's going to be required for dental and medical offices, with all the setbacks that are going to be required, there is not going to be enough room for them to have a lot of height anyway. For the fact that he doesn't want it that tall, and for the fact that there are too many things already impeding having too much, let me get cooled off. This is very personal to me because I'm going to very much miss that church. And we do go to church on 6th South and 1st West now. But I have been to that church for 44 years because I lived in another house on 2nd East that has been since taken down for 2 years before we moved into this house. I do not want to see town center in my neighborhood. It's that simple and that complicated, I know. But that just means once we have that infiltration, it is so much easier to spread it. The FLUP doesn't say that we're supposed to have mixed residential, and yet we are going to have that. Are they going to start taking down those townhouses in 10 or 20 years? That would be ridiculous. So why do they want to put town center there when we could have a mixed use, because if it's going to have some retail underneath with the dental and medical offices and maybe one apartment, even if that gives leeway for more, I don't think that's what's planned. And if what we heard from the dentist himself is what they're really going to do, why should we worry about mixed use giving them too much leeway? It doesn't make sense, especially since we have the 25-foot setbacks on 2 sides, and we're going to need parking. I would like to see mixed use so that, and I love Sandy Goodlander. She has been great. She's the one who got it stepped down from TC1. But we don't need TC2 there. We don't have a big enough property. Even with TC2, there would be 30 units per acre. but they'd have to have parking, they'd have to have setbacks. Therefore, I think we should consider something less invasive to our neighborhood. This is the edge of the neighborhood. This is not town center.
Thank you, Neil.
Hi, Mark Thornley I live in the Hillcrest area. I am in favor of the change in rezoning. Initially, I partitioned for TC1 only because it was on the future land use plan. Honestly, it doesn't really matter as long as I can build a dental office, a couple dental offices, maybe a medical office as well. So I did mention about apartment. The reason I did that is when I got married, my parents had an apartment for me, and I thought it would be nice to have an apartment there. They could be caregiver of the yard and everything, and that could be their payment. But anyway, that's why I brought that up. So I am coming from TC2. My current office is on 1st East, 2nd North. It's a really small office. Parking is a huge issue, and going with the fire department, there's those questions of parking that are difficult. And so my plan is to have plenty of parking for the office space that we have. I have architects that are specific for dental medical complexes, so they're the ones drawing up the plans and everything, so that's what their focus is. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Seeing no other comment, let's bring it back to the council for further discussion or action.
I'm sympathetic to what Dr. Yost said, and so I'm wondering why we can't give the zoning adequate to what Dr. Thornley needs, but not something that might cause additional stress to the neighborhood.
My understanding is the difference between commercial and TC2 is not that different in terms of the height and the number of housing.
Mixed use will be more dense.
And what in commercial, you can still put housing and commercial on the top. So I think for me, whatever we zone it, whoever has the property can do that. And it's not that I don't trust Dr. Thornley, but I think when you look back historically in the city, there have been projects that have been brought forward, they've been rezoned, and then that project has been swapped out and something else has been put in its place that can be the maximum. So I would always be cautious to zone for a specific project as opposed to zoning to what makes sense for the future of the city and for the future of the neighborhood. That would be my comment on that, Tom. Whatever the zone is.
Exactly. And I don't know, I know that Gail's very passionate about the concepts and the difference between mixed use and town center. Is it just the name? Because mixed use is actually more dense and can have more in it than town center too.
But it's not going to, because the setbacks and the parking, it's going to have to be not very dense at all.
But the actual parameters for what mixed use is would allow for greater density than town center too. I know you have to build within the confines of the property itself, but it does allow for greater. So mixed use could actually be more dense than town center too, as far as looking at that neighborhood. I think that's the point you're making to me.
Yeah, it is, but I don't know whether it's just the name of it, or whether mixed use is really a better fit for that property. And, what I don't want to have happen is for if we rezone it TC2, we don't have creep going any direction from that based on that TC2. But that could happen with mixed use as well. You could have that potential for mixed use creep.
Russ, you said TC2 was created to have a more residential buffer?
Yeah, TC2 wasn't in existence until just a couple of years ago. And the decision was to break up that town center into a bigger, more intense core and then a smaller, less intense kind of fringe. And let me back out, I don't have a larger map, but if you see the TC2 areas on our zoning map, they're, first east, second east, first west, and then all of the TC1 is kind of the Main Street corridor. But it all goes back to the general plan on, trying to keep the city and the country. How do we accommodate our growth? We're a fast-growing state, #1 in the nation. And this future land use plan, this general plan, anticipates growth in the town center area.
But that argument says we want to have high density in that particular parcel. And what the proponent is saying, I want to do a dental office in 1 unit. So it doesn't need 30 DUs per acre. It only needs what is required for a dental office and an apartment complex, or a small one, rather, 1 unit. I mean, that's what the proposal is. And if they were to sell or go out of business, somebody can come in and say, hey, I want to do something different.
I want to put a drive-through here because it's commercial. I'm just saying, like, whatever we put the zoning is, there's going to be a risk that if for whatever reason this project doesn't move forward and we've got a project right behind it that's nearing its expiration date, I think, with building costs and things, I'm apprehensive to zone something that could actually have a more detrimental effect on the neighborhood. And
Well,
to me,
that's what I'm saying.
to me,
I'd
a
like to
commercial
have-
zone would be,
That's what I'm saying, I'd like to have a lesser zone that still accommodates what they want to do.
But we don't have one.
we don't have commercial.
Well,
It
can a
goes
dental
to-
office go in a mixed what is it,
Should,
MR?
No, it's
It's
residential. That doesn't have commercial.
multifamily, no, it can't go in multifamily. We don't have a zone for that. We don't have a zone that, that would accommodate
Fits that
low density commercial, or whatever you want to call
Well,
it.
how do you have low-density commercial all over the place?
Because
That's a commercial.
that's what people chose to build. That doesn't mean they couldn't tear it down and build something much more dense.
We have a neighborhood center zone, which is actually geared very, very small. It's the island market. Doesn't allow the office, but there is the community commercial zone, which, is it Dwell Realty? Which is the one on 2nd West and about 9th North? That's a community commercial as well as the tandoori oven kind of complex there. It allows medical with a conditional use permit. But that's the lowest grade commercial that we have. But again, I think you have to think about Amy's comment though too, is long range, what's the best zone for this location?
Would it be okay to have Commissioner Goodlander come up and talk about what zoning or what planning commission's thoughts were on this? Because I know you guys modified what the original request was and had quite a lengthy discussion about it.
We didn't have that information until after we made
No, but I'm
public.
saying, would Commissioner, I'd be curious as to.
Sandy would love to come up and talk
On
to
what the
us.
planning commission,
She'd just love
what
it.
the planning commission's rationale was, because you did talk about the community commercial and you did talk about those, as I recall, at that meeting. So I'm just,
I would be okay with that, if you would like to. You have 3 minutes.
Now she says,
another committee these meetings are bad.
now she says.
I'm starting my timer for 3 minutes.
I'm just saying, we rely on you to bring us information. You're here, I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. I'm Sandy Goodlander, and when this project came to the Planning Commission, my concern was that if the original ask was for TC1, and my concern was that I knew that what was planned, but once, it's like what Amy says, once it's zoned, it's out of our hands, we cannot restrict. And so we were looking for something, first of all, that would meet the needs of the property owner, but also makes sense for a city. As planning commissioners, a lot of times, there's the FLUP and there's things that are already zoned. And people come in and want to carve out a little piece here and a little piece there that really doesn't always make sense. And so there's kind of also that need to keep things cohesive. This is a town center block. You know, and we've got the MR12 that would help be the buffer between the residential, but we talked about commercial, the mixed use, and we talked about community commercial. And both of those would still allow Dr. Thornley to do what he wants to do, but the mixed use would allow for a higher density. If he sold the project to somebody else, they could put in more housing, which would require more parking and be a bigger mess. And so we just felt, in looking at all of those parameters, that was kind of the decision-making, the process that we used, was to keep it cohesive with the plan of the city, to protect the neighborhood with 25-foot setbacks, lowest density, and still have, be able to allow the dental office. So that was what our thinking, and that was kind of the discussions that we had during our planning meeting.
So what made you not choose community commercial?
I think it was back to that, the idea of just having little pockets here and there of something different. And community commercial would work, but it's not going to significantly change. I know that Dr. Yost is worried that now someone's going to come in and say, well, there's something already on that corner, so now we can encroach. I don't think community commercial would change that significantly. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. You know, as long as I'm on the planning commission, we'd like to protect those neighborhoods. But I don't see that would make a significant difference to encroachment or to somebody using that as a precedent, saying, well, it's there on the corner. So there was all those different things combined, and just as from a planning standpoint, it's just tidy's not the right word, but it just makes sense not to keep carving out little pockets here and there that are different. So,
Thank you.
does anybody have any other questions for me?
Wonderful, thank you.
That's why you're paid $30.
That's exactly right.
It's dinner.
Bus ride.
Dinner and a movie.
Any more discussion? Any action?
I would move acceptance of 21-15, ordinance 21-15.
I'll second the motion.
It says TC1.
As TC2. Do I need to amend it as TC2?
The ordinance says TC2, so it's correct.
I know, but the public hearing announcement says TC1.
And that just reflects that original agenda.
I know, but we need to make sure we get it right.
Okay.
TC2.
So it says the ordinance
It
is
says
certain
Adams
maps or
neighborhood.
maps entitled official zoning map is hereby amended and the following properties and is specifically identified in Exhibit A as attached or hereby zoned from traditional neighborhood residential NR6 to town center to TC2. That's what the
And
ordinance
it is in the
reads.
minutes as TC2.
And it's corrected to
Good catch.
Wilson.
It's TC2
It
as
has
well.
been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our next public hearing, it requested for a continuance. Do we need to have a motion for that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would we continue ordinance 21-16 to the October 5 meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we continue ordinance 21-16 to October 5th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's continued. All right, our next public hearing, ordinance 21-17. For code, Mike.
Okay, we went through these last time. Do you want me to go through them again as we
I'll show
go?
you all of them, please.
This is the best part of the night, right?
No, this public hearing, we need to do one at a time, don't we?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. I tried.
Ordinance 21-17, this is an amendment to our conditional use criteria in 1742. State law change required that we use objective standards in our decision-making for the CUPs. So we went through and rewrote the language, made sure that things were objective so that they weren't subjective. But hopefully you had a chance to look at the language, and if you have any questions, let me know.
I did want to say, and I said it last time, I did strongly ask the planning commission to review the conditional use table to make sure that those conditional uses that are listed there are ones that they really want to have. So if they don't, to request changing the table. So
Did that happen?
I don't know. Hopefully,
I don't think it wasn't on the agenda last time.
Mike, you get to put it on the agenda.
For next time. Now let's open this up for a public hearing for ordinance 21-17. Anyone that would like to comment, now is your opportunity. Not seeing anyone step up, let's bring it back to the council for action.
Since this is all state mandated language change, I move we approve ordinance 21-17.
Do I have a second? There we go. All right. Thank you.
It's like a big flag, we're all just sort of like.
It's been moved and seconded.
I want another cupcake.
No, another cupcake.
That's tomato.
Yeah, I brought tomatoes too. Ordinance 21-17, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next public hearing.
Okay, this is ordinance 21-18, and what we are proposing to do is change the commercial development standards in 1710 and clarify what types of residential uses are appropriate on a ground floor of a mixed-use project in the commercial zone. We want to define the accessory residential uses so that there's no question on what they are: lobby, mailroom, mechanical storage, bike area, lounge, fitness area, pool, sauna, things that truly are accessory in nature, and then mandate that on that ground floor of a mixed-use project in the commercial zone that 80% of that is commercial space and 20% is residential accessories or amenities. So that person can decide how they want to mix up that 20% or 80%. So here's the proposed language. It also, well, you can read the proposed language. We also took out enclosed parking on the ground floor, so that's not permitted in that 80%, the commercial threshold. So hopefully it just makes it easier and cleaner to understand when people come in for the mixed-use project.
So you have a pool in the very beginning, the first slide. You had defined accessory residential uses, and that is the 20%, correct?
That's correct.
So they can't have a pool in the 80%.
That's correct, unless it's commercial in nature. So unless they build a commercial pool that's open to the public and a commercial venture, business licensing like that, then yes.
And that has to go through the health department too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't, personally, I'm very upset about the pool counted as commercial, but, so. I am.
You need to settle down. Take some of your pills.
Oh, I would like to say that pool can be commercial in a residential structure, you know, I mean, but I suppose it's a mixed use, it's a commercial structure with residential on the top. So
What we're saying is that what we normally or typically see in this area is you'll see a small pool that is generally geared towards residential, people that live there.
right.
But pools are in hotels all over the world, so it is commercial in that sense. So if you wanted to build a hotel in the zone and put a pool, we wouldn't have any problem with that. So it just gets down to kind of that, you know, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is a duck. If they want to make it a pool that's available to the public, it's got to meet kind of that threshold of meets the health code standards. They've got to license it for commercial activity for the public, things like that. So.
Has the bathrooms and changing rooms and.
And a sign that says, please shower before you use the pool.
Yeah,
That nobody ever does.
but I'm just, yeah, I just.
The heartburn.
I have angst regarding, again, people who try to do what they want to do and call it something else. And so that's what I'm trying to, I'm like, yeah, I just, if its use is for the benefit of the residents, it should be counted in the 20%.
putting feathers on a dog doesn't make it a duck.
That's correct. That is my thought, exactly. So, I would, yeah. I don't know how to change it, but that's my feeling. Well, no, we can change it. But, you know, I just would like to, because I don't know whether the proposed language is part of the enforceable component of the restrictions. Craig has to answer that, maybe.
The goal is if you look at the existing language, it doesn't really give you any clarity on what residential uses are. So we encourage in a mixed-use product in the commercial zone, ground floor commercial, residential above. We also want that residential element to succeed. We want it to be more than just a bunch of apartments above, you know, a Jimmy John's sandwich shop. So, you know, you could have a fitness center that would qualify both as a residential amenity as well as a commercial venture. But I think we're kind of hindered by what we perceive to be the appropriate size or element of that to succeed. I think that's the problem with the pool, is it looks like it's a pool geared towards its residents, but at the same time, it may be a pool designed very specifically for water polo that none of us have any experience in, but we're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I guess all we're trying to do is define, to give the planning commission some clarity on what they could see in a 20%, 80% ratio, and what should be teased out as normal residential types of accessory uses.
And this factors in when you're looking at like some of those density bonuses, correct? Did this come up with the mixed use project? There's
No.
a question as to what at the lower level was 80% commercial versus 20, because
But that's a mixed use project, not a commercial.
Yeah, this came up out of a project down there at the Y, and they had residential on top, commercial on the ground floor, parking as well, and they had a pool element as well. And that's what really triggered the discussion. It's like, we need to better define, give the planning commission better tools on how to define when they look at a project.
So this only applies to commercial with residential on the top, it does not apply to mixed use.
That's correct.
Is it appropriate for us to create the same sort of, because there was a big discussion about the metric that's used for a density bonus.
Yeah.
And that you can get you get it unit by unit, not like you get a density bonus or you don't.
yeah, some of these issues were like, is the bike room commercial or not? I mean, I remember at that discussion when they were looking at it, it may make sense over time to look at what the mixed use.
And that was a mixed use project.
That was
Yeah,
mixed
that was
use.
mixed use.
But the mixed use, you get the bonus based on the amount of commercial on the lower
Right.
space.
And
So understanding what commercial is would be.
Yeah, and the mixed use has a kind of a dimensional standard as well. And we did that originally to avoid kind of the vending machine approach. You put some vending machines, it's all commercial, have a nice day. And this is actually a more sound approach to defining what that commercial space is, because again, people have to come into a lobby area, there's a stairwell, elevators, there's certain amenities that you want with that product. Yet you also want the ability, and again, it gets back to what Russ said earlier, you know, keep the country, the city. We got to put some more density in these projects to make our downtown that much more lively, things like that. So how do you get there? You encourage more density, but you encourage the amenity package to go with it.
And then I can their car to drive to a fitness center or to drive to a.
Okay.
I said I asked for that deal.
Unless there's any other comments, this is a public hearing. Who would like to comment on ordinance 21-18? Now's your chance.
Sandy?
You're gonna pass.
We're good.
Okay, I do not see anyone jumping up to speak. Let's bring it back to the council for action.
Move acceptance of, is it 2118?
21-18. It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor of ordinance 21-18, say aye.
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 It's a reluctant aye.
It's okay, it's okay.
Can you put that in the minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, Teresa.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Reluctant aye, still an aye.
I know. Just like a lazy one.
Yeah.
You got a rough night.
Next ordinance, please.
All right, ordinance 21-19, another code amendment, 1707, 08, 09, and 62, and this is the result of a change in state law. This has taken away our abilities of local government to regulate design in single-family or two-family dwellings, so a single-family or a duplex. Originally, it included townhomes. We realized a later version took that out. But anything that we would normally associate with design, color, roof pitch, architectural ornamentation, styling, things like that. So it's a response to that. What else?
So what happens with our overlay with respect to building height and materials and fences and stuff up by the deer pen?
Up by Deer Pen?
Yes. So we have that overlay.
Yeah. Well, we have up in Deer Pen, we have it, it's because it's on a slope. But in theory, all these things will go out the door. So we can require, regulate the fencing, the color, whatever we did on that, but if it's got any of these elements on that house, we can't require.
So we're gone is the blending in the landscape kind of colors and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah, anything that's on this list, exterior color is no longer allowed,
even with an overlay.
even with an overlay.
You're sure?
Positive.
Well, that stinks.
Yeah, it does.
I didn't study this as well, but are you saying we cannot do anything with regulation of these upper items
On a single-family dwelling.
on a single?
Yeah. So if somebody up in Amy's neighborhood wants to put in a big giant pink palace,
That's perfectly square.
perfectly square, more power to them.
With 3 windows.
That's what your state legislature wanted, had the ability to
Well,
do.
it's gonna affect communities like Park City that kind of, you know. this-
Historic
this-
districts are exempt, aren't they?
Yeah. Historic districts are exempt.
So,
So HOA governments can't override this either? Like if you're an HOA, an HOA can still have building codes, just the city can't, correct?
They can have design aesthetics that are, more accessible than we have, and those would be
The
okay.
city can't do it,
The
but
city
an
can.
HOA could.
That's correct.
Yeah, but
HOA could say
Could.
you're all pink. Okay.
no. Thanks, legislature, for all they do for us. Thank you.
Wonder why they spend time on things like this, but
They're paid more than we are.
I guess. Okay, public hearing, ordinance 21-19. Let us have
We even lost the lady from the Herald
it.
Journal.
I know. Okay, seeing no one, let's bring it back to the council for action.
I'll let you approve 21-19 because the state legislature told us we had to.
Move reluctantly. Okay, it's been moved and seconded reluctantly. Here we go. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
You sounded reluctant.
I know, I don't like it either, but I don't think there's much we can do about it, so. Okay, resolution passes.
Ordinance. It's an ordinance.
Oh, ordinance, excuse me, yes, ordinance, thank you.
Okay, last one, ordinance 21-20. This is a cleanup between our parking and our landscaping ordinance. We just had some competing and conflicting language. And then we clarified recreational vehicle parking in residential neighborhoods. So, pretty simple.
Yay.
Straightforward.
Yes.
Okay, this is a public hearing for ordinance 21-20. Now's your opportunity to comment. Seeing no one, let's bring it back to the council for action.
Your turn.
I'll move we approve ordinance 21-20.
Thank you, Susan.
And I'll second that.
21-20 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Ernesto's
Ordinance passes.
running for office, he doesn't want to do anything scary. Right?
I'll start speaking Spanish.
All right, let's move to our workshops. Rich, Resolution 21-50. I can see why Kimber's not here tonight. I know how much he enjoys these really long meetings.
This is a request to appropriate a grant the 911 fund received for $102,690 for operational improvements. It's fairly broad in what it can cover, and so they'll be doing various things to improve operations at the 911 center.
We'll be doing various things.
And how
Should we have Chief on that?
did he get this grant? Do you know?
It went through UCAN. So I think the state gave UCAN some money and UCAN gave Logan City some money, as well as some of the other 911 operating centers. I believe it was based on some allocation methodology, so.
Sounds great. Any questions for Rich? All right, our next workshop has been withdrawn temporarily for the time being. Can you get that back, Russ? Okay. So no other workshop. Yeah. Any other considerations for tonight that we cannot resist?
I just wanted to point out, if I can find it, that we are doing a point-in-time count here in our community. If people are...
Don't they do it in January?
Yeah, we're doing an interim one right now, which we can do. It will be focusing on the campgrounds while people are still here and potentially living outdoors without shelter. Gail, do you remember when that is? I know you're on top of things like that. When the point in time count.
Gail's like, oh.
I think it's this Saturday. Hold on.
I do not have the physicality to be involved in that pit count. It would take more than I can.
No, but do you know when it is?
Isn't it? It's this Saturday, I believe.
I have too many health issues to deal with. And I have to be careful of those.
No, but do you know when it's happening?
I got it.
It's supposed to happen in October. We're supposed to get trained for it. Isn't the training this Saturday?
So internet here at the City Hall. It is September 25th, this Saturday from 10 to 1. There is training immediately beforehand, and if you're interested in finding out more, email me, because it's got a QR code to call for more information, so.
It's unofficial. It's not something that's going to be sent to the state or the federal people, but it helps us to have information.
Gas in our hair. So that's my only other consideration.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Amy. Anyone else?
Just wanted to make sure everybody knew that I feel the Hispanic community is very thankful for the support for the two festivals that we had, one at the Logan Library Plaza and the one on Center Street. The support has been tremendous, and I think everybody's excited about
The
it.
Heritage Festival was very successful also.
Yes.
Out there at the library, so very exciting. Anything else? If not, we will adjourn our city council meeting. Thank you all. And we will convene our Logan Development Agency. She would hit it a lot harder.
Thomas did it really hard to scare me.
Kirk, you have a public hearing for Resolution 21-48 RDA.
So this completes the.
Oh, Richard, sorry, that was Kirk.
Either way, this completes the accumulation of funds for the construction of the library. As you'll recall, $3 million were coming from the RDA, as was kind of approved earlier. So the request is just to appropriate those funds. We're moving to the Capital Projects Fund, where we'll maintain all of the funds for construction. Design is in the design funds are in the library fund.
As a reminder, what's the total budget now for the first
14 million, something plus design.
14?
So I think it's 14.2 is the, 14.1
The total with everything was 16 million.
with the design and everything else that goes along with it.
Any questions? Rich?
You're still very perky.
It was the cupcake. It was the cupcake.
Oh my God, my gosh, Sam,
All right.
would you like to say anything?
Jeannie, I'm with you.
Would you like to say anything?
Public, yes. Public comments for Resolution 21-48 RDA. Public hearing. Now's your opportunity.
I should be more serious. Is there even a reporter left?
I know, it's like,
You're Mr.
it's
Anderson.
so exciting.
Again, I'm with the Friends of the Logan Library and have been since its inception. Excuse me. Allergies, it's allergy season. We need this new library so very much. We need it as a community center. We need it because it's the most democratic use of public funds where anyone can come in and use the library. And of course, not everyone can borrow from the library. They have to be either residents of Logan City or they have to have paid a fee. But anyone is allowed to come and use the library. And the library has so many programs that I wish I could go to all of them, but I have other interests as well, so I can't go to all of them anymore, or even most of them. But I do participate in the sales, and the sale is still going on this week, is it not? There's still a sale that started Saturday, and it's going on this week. And I can't say enough about how important this library is. I live down the street from the very old library, and when we were too poor to do anything, we would go to the library with my 3 young children. I have 4 biologicals, but at the time I only had 3 young children. And I would find books like Where the Wild Things Are for 25 cents or 50 cents because there was some damage. And it was so important to have those books in my house that I otherwise could not afford, even the borrowed books that I otherwise could not afford. And it's immeasurable in the kind of influence it gives to a community.
Thank you, Dr. Yost.
And everyone's gonna wanna be inside.
So exciting. If there's no other comments, let's bring it back to the redevelopment agency for action.
I move we approve resolution 21-48 RDA. I know this money was allocated in another administration, and I'm so proud that we're able to use it and build a new library with it.
I would second it proudly.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously.
Jeez, we are
So
We
exciting.
need more cupcakes.
I know, we're down to our last item, workshop item. Kirk, resolution 21-49 RDA, please.
Okay, good evening, council. Good evening. So tonight, in front of you, we've got a proposed resolution for an incentive from the RDA to Trio Group LLC. And yes, that is 3 I's in Trio Group, hence the name Trio. And I just wanted to recognize we got Michael Jewell with us. He's one of the owners and developers of the project. So he's here. If there's any questions that I can't answer, he's happy to address those. All right, so there's a look at the project there. To be located on the corner, the northeast corner of 300 South and 100 West. It's a mixed-use project. They branded it Renewal for reasons that you will get a better sense of here as I move through the presentation. So there is the project's location. You can see Logan High School, the football field, and so just east of the tennis courts there across First west to the east on the corner of, again, 3rd South, 1st West is the project location. About 2 acres is the site. And there's another look there at the project. Just the site plan, I'm not going to bore you with that. That's already been through Planning Commission. Not that it's boring, but that's more on the technical side that they've already addressed. But I just wanted to point out the white blocks there that you see at the lower left. That's the building massing. So it sits right on the hard corner there, 3rd South, 1st East, and then moves eastward along 3rd South, and then also north on 1st West, where the parking is situated behind the building to the north and extending to the east somewhat.
So Kurt, I think it's important to tell this group that might not know that they did accommodate the width that would be needed to put a traffic light at that intersection in the future. Is that correct?
I believe so. That came up in our Economic Development Committee meeting. Yeah, I can't. Yep. Okay. It's good to have Michael here.
So just because we did have some traffic concerns about that, this particular project, I thought that was a really good thing for the future.
So you said they did a traffic study?
Well, no, I said that they have allowed enough space to add a traffic light in the future. So.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Jenny. Okay, description of the project. It will include mixed use, so we'll have some commercial space on the corner. They plan to have a bistro of about 1,200 square feet. And then in addition, about 12,000 square feet of commercial or retail space. So all told, roughly 13,000 square feet of commercial. There will be 69 residential units of various configurations. And lots of amenities with this project. Aside from commercial speed wireless internet, it will have some of the amenities that I'll flip through here. Charging stations for electric vehicles. Also electric bike charging stations. And hence that plays into the way they're branding this, the renewal, playing on the renewable energy theme. Also, rooftop patios, joint use patios, so great place to hang out for tenants and guests. And then, as I mentioned before, on the corner itself, they plan to have a bistro there. So that will add to some of the energy and vitality and be another draw for downtown. Some of the benefits that the project would bring, it adds to that housing puzzle, adding downtown housing, which has been demonstrated to be a key element of revitalizing downtowns. Of course, we've got a couple other projects that have been approved, Mill Creek started, so this adds to that cluster of housing. Also commercial use, as I mentioned, the bistro and the office and retail space. Certainly benefits the city with a contribution to its tax base with sales and property taxes. And I mentioned the promotion of alternative transportation with the charging stations. So some of the justifications for the incentive are the group, the land had been assembled over a long period of time, several years. But more recently, in order to get a site that would yield a developable site where they could land or place the project, they had to spend above market rates to acquire some of that last key piece of property, which obviously has an impact on the return on investment. Also, when you put commercial space there, that adds to your cost and risk, and particularly so where this is not on Main Street, but it's on a secondary street, 1st West. I think, there's added risk obviously there. And then the charging stations, that goes without saying that will add more cost as well as the other amenities that they're putting into this. So those are the reasons for the proposed incentive. Current conditions there, the photo on the left is looking at the corner up It's along First West looking northward, and then the photo on the right is looking eastward along Third South. So that's what you see currently, and that will be transformed into a really nice looking mixed-use project. So the Economic Development Committee has reviewed this, and you can see in the resolution the proposed recommendation, which is $250,000 would be paid from the RDA's Affordable Housing Fund to the TRIO group upon project completion. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those, or Michael's here as well.
We did get a letter in advance of the meeting today with, again, questions about moderate income housing. The fact that this is all market rate, was there a discussion on this as to whether or not the proponent would want to include a couple of set-aside units for lower income folk, or?
I'll let him respond to that. I will point out, first of all, and it's worth mentioning again, thanks for bringing that up, Amy, that RDA law, or the statute on the books with the state when they created these redevelopment project areas, does allow for the affordable housing funds, which are earmarked by the RDA for those funds to be used for market rate housing in situations where you have a project area where blight exists. And when the downtown RDA was created, there was a blight study, a determination of blight. So with that criteria, it does allow for affordable housing funds to be used, as I said, for market rate housing. I think the justification, obviously the legislature saw value in bringing housing of whatever tier, if you will, of pricing into an area that's affected by blight, particularly, I believe, in a downtown area where housing, as I mentioned earlier, is such a key piece. I'll also mention that in January, on a different project we were talking about at that point in time, boy, I think there was only 30 homes on the market that were available, and maybe 18 of which were in a more affordable price point. So housing inventory was so low, so at least this brings some housing inventory that's more affordable. And if you look at our average median income and you know, the representative share that a rental cost would factor into a person's total expense profile, this, you know, would be affordable for some of those in the 80% AMI category, I believe. So, I mean, I haven't studied that closely. That was January. Now we're in, September? But, you know, and also with rentals in the downtown area, urban area, maybe I'm just throwing out an example, if you have a couple that maybe if they live out in Hyde Park or other parts of Logan might need 2 cars, maybe you only need 1, maybe you don't need any. So there could be some economic advantages there. But with that, Mike, you want to respond to the comment?
Yeah, we looked into affordable housing. It's a surprisingly it's low income housing tax, right? So LIHTC we call it, and it's surprisingly competitive to qualify for LIHTC in Utah. It's something that it's especially difficult to break into that because the way that the state works is essentially the more often you've done a LIHTC project, the more likely you are to be awarded another LIHTC project. So it's difficult to get your first LIHTC project. We are extraordinarily interested in that, and we're going to continue to try to push for LIHTC projects. We weren't able to do it for this project, but it is something as a group that we're certainly very, very interested in. And then I guess I would just second what Kirk described. Right now, I think it's certainly an affordable alternative. We're seeing an interesting market, especially in Utah. We're growing like crazy, and right now, the pricing is just a function of scarcity. So I think the more projects that we can get, especially in the downtown, in areas where we're looking for density, the more affordable a market rate will become. Right now, I think you're seeing, it's just like anything in the market where there's scarcity, where demand outstrips supply, people will pay a premium. And I think it's incumbent on cities to figure out where to put density, because the more we need to catch up to demand in order to equalize what that market rate really is. We've modeled that a little bit, we've done some studies, and we think that market rate is going to stabilize in the next 3 to 5 years. So I would expect that to become, I guess, quote unquote, more affordable. But I guess to answer your question, it's really, we would love to do LIHTC projects. We couldn't get this one to be a LIHTC project, but we're actively pursuing opportunities for that.
I think I speak for the council when I say bring us a project, and we'd like to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. We will be stoked to get a LIHTC project.
Jamie, I got an email too from someone.
Participate.
I can't say we'll give you money, but bring us a project, and there is money available. Is there not, Rich? No, Rich doesn't know. Rich doesn't know money.
We'll figure out that aspect, but if we can get approval for a project like that, we would be thrilled.
I will say I asked that exact question.
Yeah, Kurt, did I comment?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to mention in response to an email I think you were copied on that I received, just regarding the use of RDA funds in the context of affordable housing or market rate housing. There was an assertion there that the RDA is not using some of these RDA or reserved affordable housing funds for those projects which are, in that up to 80% AMI category. And I can go back and do a tally, but we've spent somewhere between $750,000, maybe close to $1 million on various projects over the past 15 years or so, including Welcome Home on in Logan, the city's own housing rehabilitation program, neighborhood nonprofits, neighborhood improvement program. We've partnered with, there's others too. So over the years, I just wanted to point that out to make a clarification that money has been used for, up from that 0% to 80% AMI. Then the program the mayor rolled out, which you approved, which was the neighborhood improvement program, where funds were offered to homes in various neighborhoods. So I just wanted to point that out.
So if there were a project, a housing project, and they wanted to use affordable housing money, do they have to be within the confines of an existing RDA?
No, anywhere in Logan City.
And we could use RDA money on
Yeah, it's
Low-income housing money.
low-income housing money.
it? Okay, thank you.
For low or moderate, or just for low?
Up to 80% of the average median income, yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Kurt?
No.
All right, our RDA is adjourned. Thank you all, the 5 of you that stuck around.
What a great meeting.
Chief Jensen, thank you. Hung in there with us the whole way.
Yes,